think this is where we left off.
Probably there's less offer to keep you in line by way of enticements or incentives, and more emphasis on an attempt to I wouldn't say sanction you, but I mean it doesn't interest me and I don't go on them. But some MPs enjoy and get a lot out of foreign visits. Now, for any MP that voted against the government, they'd suddenly find that those trips on parliamentary delegations to the Caribbean dried up, for instance. Now, it's not a terribly serious point, but that's an indication of the way it operates. Yeah.
Can a MP be told that he or she won't be the candidate in the next election? Does the party have that kind of power?
Yeah, ultimately, what we would describe as the party whip. That's, if you like, the party sort of stamp of approval and identification of you as in my case, a Labour Party politician could be withdrawn. In rare instances, it is, and come the point where selection.
So if you don't vote along party line, they can run a different candidate in your region and essentially force you to run as an independent, which basically gives you no chance, right?
Goes on for candidates at
That's why there's such conformity in party voting.
a future election, then that person would find that there could not be a Labour Party candidate.
There can be, in theory, repercussions. In practice, punishment doesn't work nearly as effectively as as rewarding people and making them want to vote in the same way. So the job of the chief whip is not to punish people. It is to give severe, sometimes, tellings off to people who fail to follow the party line, and that's from time to time what I would do. But once I had reached that stage, I would have failed in that particular aspect. So what I would be trying to do would be to forestall any voting against the party line by knowing everybody in the party very well indeed, knowing what they would be likely to do, making sure that if it was against our interests, they didn't want to do it, by motivating them in the right way. So it's an all-time constant job of work of assessing people's character and working out how best to get them all to pull together.
Well,
So he was the whip then.
there's a tradition that the Conservatives have always been able to ensure on loyalty to their leadership by sidling up to the Member of Parliament that looked as if he might be going the wrong way and saying, George, I know you're not really interested in becoming a Lord, but don't you think Cynthia would like to be a lady? And that's dropping the heavy hint on the Conservative side, which is very effective because they all want to go to the House of Lords. On the Labour side, it's been a different tradition. It's been, if you don't toe the line, my boy, we will tell your folk back home, and they might very well decide they don't want you to be candidate for your safe seat next time. Now, neither of those would work with the Liberal Democrats. We're far too democratic. So I'm afraid in our case, we simply have to persuade people that this is the way to go. And since we are not, any of us, really career politicians, you wouldn't be a career politician if you came to the Liberal Democrats. It's far too difficult to get elected. People on the whole tend to be of the same persuasion, same frame of mind, and fortunately I don't have many problems of party discipline.
One of the more contentious issues regarding constitutional reform in the United Kingdom concerns what to do with the House of Lords. Keep them as they are, scrap them altogether, or somehow reform them.
So that's basically the same debate we have with the Senate, which we modeled after the House of Lords.
The Labour Party in 1997 campaigned on the idea of somehow reforming the House of Lords. And to be sure, they have been reformed since 1997. But where to go from here? To turn it into some sort of United States-style Senate, or to keep that elite element to it? We did hear from a number of members of Parliament about where to go with the House of Lords.
The House of Lords is quite a unique institution in many respects, because unlike most legislative assemblies around the world, Congress, French National Assembly, whatever, it is not elected. There have been very significant changes in recent years.
Which is the same way we run the Senate. Canada, they're appointed.
Because up until 1999, in theory, the House of Lords had a potential membership of something like 1,100 members, because anyone who had a peerage, which is obviously, you know, being a viscount or a lord, you have to, I believe, be at least a knight of the realm, was entitled to sit in the House of Lords, as were the senior bishops of the Church of England. Now, in 1999, in response to New Labour's election promises, they did end the hereditary principle, whereby simply the only people who can now sit in the House of Lords are life peers. However, what life peers are simply those who have been given public recognition of their public service, and often are former members of the House of Commons, senior government ministers, but also included are people like former trade union leaders, captains of industry, etc. But they, although have the right to sit in the House of Lords, their peerage does not pass on to their son. So, end of the hereditary principle. The government, however, did do a deal with the House of Lords in that they agreed to allow 92 hereditary peers to remain for a transitional period. And those 92 hereditary peers were chosen by the existing members of the House of Lords. So in reality, although it's not a directly elected body, it no longer is, as I've said, dominated by those who just inherited their titles.
It's very different from Congress. The House of Lords cannot be involved in tax raising matters, but they look at any legislation that is going through and will often amend it. And at the present moment, the House of Lords is the only legislative forum we've got to really challenge and take on some of the wilder ideas that this government has.
The role of the House of Lords is and always has been to act as a revising chamber and as a...
This is making me wonder how the Senate exactly. How do you become a member of the Senate in the Canadian government? Okay, well, take our question elsewhere. Okay. In Canada, senators are not elected by the public. Instead, they are appointed by the Governor General on the advice of the Prime Minister. While the process has become more independent in recent years, legal requirements remain rooted in the Constitution Act of 1867. Constitutional requirements. To be eligible for an appointment to the Senate, an individual must meet 5 specific criteria set out in Section 23 of the Constitution. Must be at least 30 years old. Must be a full Canadian citizen. Property ownership. You must own land worth at least $44,000. Clear of mortgage and debts. In the province or territory you are appointed to represent. Net worth. Your overall net worth, property and assets minus all debts, must be at least $4,000. So you have to have basically a positive net worth. Residency. You must live in the province or territory for which you are appointed. Quebec senators are represent one of 24 specific electoral divisions and live in that division. or in their property or in their property. How much power does the Canadian Senate have? Can they stop a bill from being passed? In the Canadian Parliament, the Senate is often described as the chamber of somber second thoughts. While it is technically a co-equal body to the House of Commons, power is shaped significantly by constitutional law, long-standing political conventions. 1. Legislative power. Can they stop a bill? Yes, technically and legally, the Senate has the power to defeat, reject any bill that comes before it. For a bill to become law in Canada, it must be passed in identical form by both the House of Commons and the Senate, then receive royal assent. The Senate votes against the bill, that bill is dead. However, the Senate uses this absolute veto very sparingly. Instead, they typically use their power in 3 ways. Amendments. The Senate frequently suggests changes to bills. The House of Commons accepts these amendments, the bill proceeds. The House rejects them, the bill may go back and forth. Delay. The Senate can slow down the passage of a bill by sending it to committees for lengthy study, which forces the government to defend or rethink its position. Defeat. Outright rejection is rare. The Senate generally defers to the House of Commons because the House is the elected body, whereas the Senate is appointed. The Senate in the US is an elected body, right? Why do we have an appointed Senate? Major difference between what the Senate can do and what it actually does. Veto power, absolute veto, most rarely used, usually defers to the House of Commons and bills. All things. All right. How does the Senate in Canada compare to the House of Lords in the UK? Canadian Senate is essentially the political child of the UK House of Lords. When Canada was being formed in 1867, the founders wanted a Westminster-style system, but had to tweak it to fit a massive, culturally diverse North colony. While they shared the same DNA, acting as an unelected upper house that reviews legislation, there are some distinct differences in how they operate today. Total seats, Canada has 105. The House of Lords has 800 or so. They were saying that anyone with like a title could sit on the House of Lords. Basis of seats, appointment only. The UK, in Canada, it's appointment only. UK, life peers, hereditary peers, and bishops. Retirement in Canada, mandatory at 75. I think we should lower that because I've seen that elsewhere too. Where was that? Our Supreme Court also has a mandatory 75. Like, we should lower that down a little. The UK House of Lords, no mandatory age. Voluntary retirement. Canada, technically absolute veto powers. The UK, delay powers only. Primary focus in Canada, regional and minority representation. The UK House of Lords, expertise and specialized revision. Go back.
Bit of a break on the over-enthusiasm sometimes of elected politicians. So when the House of Commons sends new legislation up to the House of Lords, the House of Lords are able to spend a good deal more time with actually a very deep amount of expertise on that legislation. During the last two parliaments, though, when in the House of Commons there has been such a huge government majority, a majority significantly larger than the main opposition party itself. It has been the House of Lords that has been more effective in holding the government to account, because the government does not have a majority in the House of Lords. The House of Lords feels constrained about using the fact that the government doesn't have a majority, and so from time to time they back away from outright confrontation. But it has been the government's main check and balance, apart from the media, because the House of Commons, frankly, at the moment, is not working well.
And the House of Lords is
So when one side has a majority, Senate or House of Lords can act as like a mediating factor to keep them in check. Okay.
a revising chamber. They do a useful job in that, and having a closer look at legislation than the Commons often does, and they have people of some authority and standing and expertise who can improve legislation. But they're entirely unelected, and they're a mixture of inherited lords who are still there, and they're there mainly because their families had a history in which their great-great-great-great-grandmother was the mistress of a king, or their great-great-great-great-grandfather was a crook, robber baron, wherever it might have been. But they are, it's an extraordinary anachronism, a hangover from the past, that people are not there by the first past the post system, but a system as described by Tony Benn, as the first past the bedpost system. The firstborn would go there. And it's indefensible that people should be chosen on that basis. It was a disastrous experiment to have the people's peers, to have people in who were chosen as representatives of ordinary people. And it was an almighty disaster, because the people who were appointed were very much the same people who were going in there either by birth or because of privilege in life. And I remember hearing the chairman of the committee who appointed the so-called people's peers saying they couldn't have anyone who was a waitress or a bus driver in the House of Lords because they wouldn't be articulate to make their point. But as someone who was a bus driver for 3 years and who married a woman who was a waitress for the same period, I was very offended by that, and both of us can string a few words together and could make a case. But the same kind of snobbery privilege that's been part of the House of Lords for centuries is still there. But there's been a reluctance to change it, a reluctance not only from the Lords itself, who fight tooth and nail to remain there, but also from Tony Blair, who said he's in.
Is it still done the same way? How do you become a member of the House of Lords in the UK? Okay. Well, the Canadian Senate is based entirely on appointment. The UK House of Lords is a unique hybrid of merit-based appointment, religious rules, and inherited titles. That's what he's talking about, the inherited titles. There are currently 3 main paths to become a peer in the House of Lords. Life peer, the most common way. Vast majority of the roughly 800 members are life peers. Titles are for their lifetime only and cannot be passed down to their children. So, getting away from the inherited title system. Political appointments, cross branchers, the appointment commission, independent body vets all nominations. Variety specifically nominates the non-political crossbenchers. Hereditary peers, family treeway. Till 1999, hundreds of people sat in the House of Lords simply because they inherited a title, like Earl or Duke. Today that number is capped at 92. By elections. When one of these 92 hereditary peers dies or retired, a by-election is held. However, it's not a political vote. Only people who already hold a hereditary title are on a specific register can run. Only other hereditary peers in the House of Lords get to vote for them. So the hereditary aspect is capped at 92 of the approximately 800 members. Spiritual, the religious way. The UK still maintains a formal link in the Church of England and the government. The bishops, there are 26 seats reserved for senior bishops of the Church of England. Okay. They still have small religious and a hereditary group. There's the House of Lords,
In favor.
their version of the Senate.
A wholly appointed chamber.
The United Kingdom's third party, the Liberal Democrats, want to see the House of Lords turn into a wholly elected chamber, as Richard Allen explained.
What are the current popular parties in the UK and what do they stand for? Okay, let's see. Because he's talking about the Liberal Democrats now. I'm so used to the US two-party and here in Canada primarily a two-party system as well. UK political landscape in 2026 is currently defined by significant volatility, the rise of populist alternatives to the traditional two-party system. So they have a traditional two-party system as well. The first time in modern history, the two main parties, Labour and Conservative. So I'm going to assume the Conservative Party is like our Conservative Party. And Liberal Labour. Get down here. Are frequently pulling behind or neck and neck with Reform and Green Party. Really, the Green Party is making ground. Here's a breakdown of the major parties they currently stand for. Okay. Reform UK, the populist right. Current status leading in many national polls. Core message, get Britain back on track by cutting taxes, scrapping environmental regulations. Too many environmental regulations does a lot of damage. Key stances, energy, repel the Climate Change Act, acts net zero levies to lower energy bills. They support maximizing North Sea oil and gas extraction. Economy, significant tax cuts. And, like, I don't know if that's how you fix the economy. I mean, in the US, they just keep trying it. And it hasn't caused some kind of miracle yet. Okay, so significant tax cuts, including abolishing stamp duty, primary homes, and scrapping business rates for high street shops. They propose a 5,000 first job bonus for young workers. £5,000. Immigration and welfare, stricter border controls, and massive reforms of the welfare system encourage people back to work. This is a really cut down summary. I'll probably have to look into more depth to actually have opinions of the parties themselves. Let's go through the other ones. The Green Party seeing a massive surge under leader Zach, polling around 19%. Really? So the traditional parties are polling below the new parties. What is this? Okay, current status seen a massive surge. An eco-populist agenda framed as the 99% against the 1%. Key stances, nationalization. They want to bring water and energy companies back into public ownership. Okay. Water and energy companies. Privatize that then. I remember hearing about that. Wow. I think it was the water, how volatile the water price could be in certain places in the UK. Wealth tax, implementation of a wealth tax on the ultra rich to fund public services. Like, I personally think that we should wealth tax rather than income tax. We should just swap over funding that we get, and like you wouldn't wealth tax like just the ultra rich. Like, you have your levels of your wealth tax, kind of like how we do with income, but you do it with wealth to get the funding. Wealth tax was like the first tax ever implemented, right, by the Romans. And I think that's the way to go. Housing radical reforms, including rent controls and giving council the right to buy rented homes and landlordship. Foreign policy, they have a more radical stance than Labor. Their proposal to leave NATO and strong support for Palestinian statehood. It's so weird to me because I see this in the NDP as well, where they have like a couple good ideas, but then there's just some really crazy ideas thrown in there as well. Like, I mean, leave NATO. NATO's kind of what's defined the world for the last 50 years. I guess we'll see. Let's see what the original two parties are doing. The Conservative Party, in a period of rebuilding, polling around 17 to 19%. Core message, positioning themselves as the sensible alternative to Reform UK while adopting many of their right-wing policies. I mean, the further they move and the more support they get, then a conservative is gonna, like, they need voters. Yeah, you have to go to where the people are. Key stances, law and order, zero tolerance approach for school behavior, and immediate justice community sentence for low-level crimes like graffiti. The NHS, legislation for minimal service levels during strikes and banning doctors from striking to protect patient safety. Infrastructure, scrapping the mandate for electric vehicles, in the 2030 ban on petrol/diesel cars. They had a ban on petrol cars. They went hard on EVs then. Like, I don't know what it's like in the UK, but Canada's large and the infrastructure for electric vehicles is not there to try and ban petrol vehicles. It's just not. All right. Well, there's two more. Okay. The Labour Party, the current government. Wait. So their fourth polling party is their government. How did that happen? The governing party under Prime Minister Keir Starmer but facing a doom loop of low approval ratings. Okay, that shows. Polling around 17 to 18%. Her message, rebuilding Britain through national missions and economic stability. Their key stance is economy. Their growth mission focuses on local jobs, creating and devolution of power to mayors and local councils. Energy, aiming to make Britain a clean energy superpower by investing in renewables, though they have faced criticism for their ban on new licenses. Worker rights, recently passed the landmark Employment Right Acts, which repeal several previously strict restrictions on trade union. Okay. Number 5, the Liberal Democrats, the middle way. Current status polling at 12 to 14%, focusing on the squeezed middle voter. Core message, pragmatic, evidence-based localism and fixing the UK's relationship with Europe. Key stances, Europe moving the UK closer to the EU single market standards to reduce trade friction, though not calling for immediate re-entry. I mean, like, that's probably just a good idea. As much as, like, trade can benefit both sides. There are cases where it certainly can harm one side more than the other. And so you certainly need, like, rules and laws around trade. I don't particularly feel that free trade is good for every country. But something close to that, probably what you want to aim for. Okay, healthcare, focusing on preventative care. That's so hard to do. People don't want to go into the hospital unless they're sick. Like, they don't want to go into the dentist unless their teeth hurt. Focusing on preventive care is it's tough to get the public on board with that. So focusing on preventive care and social care reform to stop bed blocking hospitals. The heck is bed blocking in hospital? Environment, focus on green buildings, especially retrofitting homes to be more energy efficient. Just always good, rather than just building new power plants. Summary of the big shift. Old system, pre-2024, labor versus conservative. Current 2026 landscape, 4-way or 5-way fragmentation. I mean, like, the more parties you have, the better, in my opinion. Main issues of the old system, Brexit, COVID recovery. Main issues of the new current landscape, cost of living, net zero, and NHS reform. So they're National Health Service reform. Voter mood in the old system is party loyalty. Current landscape, deep dissatisfaction with mainstream parties. Note on regional parties. The Scottish National Party, Plaid, Graham remains dominant in their respective regions, though their national polling is naturally low, 2 to 3%. All right, we'll have to look at their current system. I like how their two main parties are behind the two new parties. But really, Reform UK, the one that has the most support, and the Conservative, because if this is like the farther right. So the center right and the center left have lost to the farther right and the farther. So there's trouble, and people are seeking solutions in the extreme. Like I feel we're seeing that in the U.S. too. Trump is a further shift to the right, and the Democrats have further shifted to the left. All right, get back to the video.
This is one of the areas where we do have a strong difference with the Labour government. Certainly not everyone in the Labour Party, but with the Labour government, because we firmly believe in a democratic House of Lords. The whole approach of the Liberal Democrats has been to be constitutionalists. We actually are quite in favour of a written constitution, a written Bill of Rights, and a...
Yeah, the UK is strange like that. They don't have a written constitution. It's like constitution created from a bunch of different areas that's never been like formally written and addressed.
Defined constitution within which all the various bodies who influence our lives are democratic. And the fact that the House of Lords remains undemocratic is a major problem for us in an area where we have attacked the government very robustly. The Labour Party is split. A lot of members of the Labour Party agree with us. They'd like to see a democratic House of Lords, but the Labour government doesn't want to change things because it's too convenient for them at the moment. Our proposal for the House of Lords would be to replace it with an elected Senate. And we see the elected Senate as being elected in thirds, so senators would serve for 6 years, a third elected every...
So he's basically describing the U.S. Senate, which is elected, and then every election they vote in a new third to the Senate. So the Senate changes more slowly than the House of Representatives.
Every 2 years, which may sound familiar, that those senators would represent regions of the United Kingdom. So we've looked at what people have for their second chamber in their legislature across the world, and that's quite a common system. That kind of elected Senate where you're electing people on a different cycle from the first chamber, because the first chamber in the British system has to remain supreme, the House of Commons. The House of Lords is on a different cycle with different powers and people elected for a little longer. But the important thing is that they're elected. At the moment, nobody elects them, they're appointed in there, and if we saw, I don't know, a developing country do that, where the president of Zimbabwe appointed everybody to the second chamber in the Zimbabwean parliament, we'd cry outrage, this is an affront to democracy, and yet we do it here in the UK. So I mean, we feel that way, it's an affront to democracy and needs sorting out. But as I say, there seems to be a real reluctance on the part of the government to tackle this. They seem happy to sort of let it ride as it is now.
We want the second chamber to be elected, and we look...
Like, once you get elected, there's very little effort to change the system you got elected into. Because you got elected, therefore, like, it works, right? Which is why these things I would consider like common sense changes. Voting on who gets to go to the Senate are slow to not happen.
With envy at your Senate. We would be quite happy to have a Senate.
Directly elected.
Yes. And we might very well go for the same sort of system as you, to make it a slightly different electoral system to the other house.
Is it possible that may happen, or do you have any...
I think this present government is a bit too cautious. It's a bit too conservative.
What would I like to see in terms of the House of Lords reforms? I'm on the Lords Reform Committee, and I've been hoping to see the government live up to its promise in the programme it set out before the last election, that we would have a more democratically accountable House of Lords. I would like to see that combined with retaining some of the deep expertise that the House of Lords currently has. So I would like to see some people in the House of Lords elected, some people appointed as now. But I would, above all, like to see the House of Lords be independent of the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister currently appoints people to the House of Lords.
Which is basically how it's done here. Because the, what is it called? The representative of the Queen has to sign them into the Senate, but it's the Prime Minister that's essentially putting forward the candidate.
He appoints people to oversee his own actions. The contradictions in that are pretty clear, and I would like to see the House of Lords become much more independent of the Prime Minister.
Well, we've said that we ought to see more of an elected element, because if once you start tinkering around a mechanism that is working, which it was, then you have to think through the logical consequences of it all. And the stagnant position of the House of Lords at the moment, and the unsatisfactory position, however useful they are to us as the Commons, is one that is not thought through, and it is absolutely classic of the government that they produce a piece of legislation and haven't thought through the consequences.
The difficulty is that there is a public cynicism about politics and politicians. So when the public are asked really about reforming the House of Lords and having an elected House of Lords, they look at it and they say, well, it would be another bunch of those elected politicians that we don't like going in there. So whether it's appointed people or whether it's elected people, we don't see much difference. And there's a kind of general sense of apathy around changing it. It's not top of people's political agenda. That's health and education, the economy and all of that. And so the government have realised that they can probably get away with not changing it. And as long as they don't change it, as long as the House of Lords doesn't have democratic legitimacy, then the Prime Minister and the ministers, the government who are in the House of Commons, can really bully them into doing what they like. They cause a bit of a problem from time to time, but if it comes to any kind of showdown, ultimately the government say, you're not elected and we are, so we win. And what they're really scared about is the dynamic of having an elected Senate, second chamber, which might start to assert itself a bit more and could claim legitimacy because it was elected. So in a sense, as long as they are not elected, they're pretty powerless.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. Because of the unelected status, they don't, like the unelected status kind of removes their power. Because technically, the Senate and the House of Commons in Canada has about the same legal power, but as we read, the Senate almost always defers to the House of Commons, the elected body. So if Senate also became elected body, then there would be another governing structure that a party would have to work around, that actual power. I still think electing them is just better.
And an irritant, they annoy the government, but they can't really do anything. And I think they're very, very scared about having an elected chamber that would act as a more effective counterbalance. We as kind of pluralists in my party, we would sort of believe in a very sort of pluralist democracy with power distributed across different centres. We would love to see that. But parties like the Labour Party, who have a tradition of being in government where they concentrated all the power to themselves, the Prime Minister is supremely powerful in the British system. They don't want to see power dispersed, and as long as only the House of Commons is elected, they've got all that power collected to themselves.
The House of Lords, I mean, it's curious. It's a curious institution. Most people, I think, see it as just a sort of oddity, really. There has been changes to the House of Lords. There was a commission of inquiry before we made the changes. That was an attempt to build some sort of consensus for the changes. I actually submitted my own evidence to that inquiry, and I argued for a fully elected second chamber. Didn't believe that you could go to it as a directly elected second chamber first in one go, and I think there are a series of steps that you can get there. And I think a chamber like that could be an integrating chamber that would allow
It doesn't look like they were successful.
strong regional representation from different parts of the country.
Like, I guess, like, they've gotten it down, was it, to 26 religious seats, 92, but none of them are still elected. Political appointments. They do the same thing we do for most of them. An independent body that appoints people to the Senate. Why not elect them
However,
to their House of Lords?
the government hasn't gone as far as that. It has abolished the hereditary right for people by accident of their birth being able to legislate in the UK, which for 700 or 800 years has stood, and I and many others would argue was long overdue for overhaul. But we've still got a hybrid second chamber in which appointment is the principal way that people take their place. Appointments now which are made by an independent commission rather than by the Prime Minister, so that's the other reform that Labour's brought in, so to remove the particular patronage that the Prime Minister had to put people in the Lords. So, you know, I think we've definitely improved the workings of the House of Lords. I think we've definitely improved its legitimacy and the basis on which it does its work. I still personally think our aim must be to move to a fully democratic chamber as a reforming, revising part of the House.
Well, they haven't got that yet. But he's talking about the things that they have done, which was getting the independent commission people in rather than Prime Minister. Which, I mean, is an improvement.
It certainly will
It looks like their last improvement was a long time ago.
decline as a small body, but it still remains very much a conservative body on virtually all issues. There are people who are reporting the status quo and are resistant to change. And it's a matter of considerable sorrow to those of us who thought that the coming of Labour governments would mean that at last we do what we hadn't done for a couple of centuries and reform the House of Lords. We've reformed it in a piecemeal system. And Lloyd George, a Welsh Prime Minister in the 20s, once said, it's fatal to try to cross a chasm with two leaps. And that's precisely what we're trying to do with the House of Lords. We half reformed it and then try to do the second half later. And you fall in the chasm in the middle in doing that. So we're in a state of limbo at the moment as far as the Lords is concerned.
They're still in the state of limbo. They fell straight down the chasm.
I think people dislike the yah-boo element of Parliament, and they do often behave like schoolboys in there. I think it should be less confrontational. I think we should be able to get a better debate without trying to score points, and I really wish we could improve that. I think it gives a very bad impression of the country.
The most frustrating is that
I mean, ours functions largely like that as well when they are open debate. Both sides are like trying to score points rather than have a discussion on policy.
time wasting. That we have the system is very antiquated, and it's interesting you compare it, for example, with the new democracies in Eastern Europe. We'll go to a European meeting now, and at a European meeting you've got people from Slovenia and Estonia and Poland and all these places where they've developed their democracies, if you like, from scratch without baggage. And they have a much more modern, efficient ways of doing things.
Did he say Poland? Might have to look at that one. Because that's a newly, well, on the global scale, a newer form of democracy. That down.
This place is built up on a whole load of tradition that goes back several hundred years, and there's a real fear about changing
Yeah,
it.
it is harder to change from established tradition. Even if you know something's better, have established tradition, it's just hard to get people moving.
Anything. So we end up doing a lot of stuff where we waste time. I was here till 1:30 in the morning last night because somebody had spoken for 3 hours on a motion that meant nothing in order to keep us there for that period of time. We've got rid of some of that, but there's still a lot left. So that lack of a sort of sense of we're here as a sort of corporate body trying to do the job well is something that ends up being very frustrating. You can, in a week, feel that you've spent 15 useful hours, but perhaps 30 less useful hours, and that balance is wrong.
I mean, I'm a backbencher by choice, which is someone who doesn't aspire to office. I was on the front bench. I was a shadow minister for 3 years. I entered Parliament, but I deliberately took a decision to go on the backbench and to become a campaigner, because I believe that's more influential. Because for various reasons, I believe that because of the party discipline, you can exercise very little power, even as a minister, particularly as a junior minister, and you're much more powerful to have a voice on the backbenches. But the difficulty is the inertia of public opinion, of trying to persuade people of radical ideas. I mean, I believe that with the cooperation with one of your countrymen called Professor Brad Rodu from the University of Alabama, I'm trying to put forward a case for what will be the biggest single improvement in public health that is likely to occur in the next 50 years. And that's to persuade people who are smokers, veteran smokers, not to give up tobacco, but to switch to smokeless tobacco. But we're against, I think that's a big frustration, is a refusal of people to shift their views.
That's going to be the biggest change in health. I mean, like, the whole, at least in Canada, the whole move away from cigarettes has gone far more extreme than switching to like smokeless tobacco. Well, there's still vapes. I mean, art still exists. I think it's a lot smaller now. It was.
They've got something in their head. My longest campaign I've been on is on illegal.
How long ago? Go back 25 years. Can you compare the number of people that vape today in Canada compared to the number of people that smoked 25 years ago? Vape. You'll get it. Gotta set the thinking mode. The landscape of nicotine use in Canada has shifted dramatically over the last quarter century. While vaping is a highly visible modern trend, the sheer number of people who smoke today, or vape today, is still significantly lower than the number of Canadians who were lighting up 2001. God, 25 years ago is 2001. Ugh. All right, here's the breakdown of the numbers. Smoking total users about 5.7 million. Compared to today, vaping is 2.1 to 2.3 million. For prevalence, age 15 plus, smoking 23. Only 23% of people smoked. We already know smoking is bad. 2001. Maybe I should have gone back further. Anyway, vaping 6%. So way down. 2001, roughly 1 in 4 Canadians smoked daily or occasionally. In 2026 vapors, current estimates place the number of adult vapors at approximately 2 million. Vape class among younger demographics today. There are 7 nuances to how these two eras compare. Demographic flip. 2001, smoking was common across all adult age groups. 2026, vaping is heavily concentrated in the 15 to 24 age bracket. While about 20% of young adults vape, the rate of adults over 25 is much lower. Total nicotine use. Interesting, if you find smokers and vapers today, the total number of Canadians using any nicotine product, 5.2 million, is actually quite close to the total number of smokers in 2001. All right, that's what I was, because it was telling vape, I wanted vape plus smoke. Vape plus people who smoke. So the people addicted to nicotine, the numbers are still about the same. This suggests that while millions have swapped cigars for vapes, the overall number of people addicted to nicotine has stayed somewhat stable, despite decades of public health scams. Oh, okay. The sombering reality. In 2001, half of smokers were daily users. In 2026, a significant portion of vapers are occasional or social users, though the rate of daily vaping is rising among youth. Okay. Reached your token model limit. Okay. Got next. Claude.
Drugs, where we're completely balmy with illegal drugs because of a policy we inherited in the 20s from your country, when there was a prohibition of alcohol, and they also prohibited a certain number of drugs. They weren't the most dangerous drugs, they weren't the most addictive drugs, and the world has suffered perversely from that, with a huge use of those drugs. And the consequence has been a vast increase in drug crime and in drug deaths. But it's such a slow period to get even medicinal cannabis in use in Britain. It will be this year. But I had a bill about this 14 years ago in this parliament, and I was regarded as sort of a sad drug pusher for even suggesting that people should use cannabis.
While there are frustrating aspects to being
suggesting people should use cannabis.
Medicinal cannabis in use in Britain. It will be this year. But I had a bill about this 14 years ago in this parliament, and I was regarded as sort of a sad drug pusher for even suggesting that people should use cannabis.
Cannabis legalized? Is cannabis legalized in the UK? Cannabis. Is cannabis legalized in the United Kingdom? Enter. Okay, Claude's having some problems. Rock, Chat GPT. Let's see. No, cannabis is not legalized for recreational use in the United Kingdom. It remains a Class B controlled drug under the Misuse of Drug Act, 1971. Recreational cannabis, possession, cultivation, supply of cannabis for non-medical purposes are criminal offenses across England, Scotland, and Wales. Maximum penalties including up to 5 years in prison and or an unlimited fine for possession and up to 14 years for supply or production. Oh. In practice, especially in England and Wales, police often issue a cannabis warning for small amounts, typically under 28 grams, intended for personal use, particularly for first offenses. This doesn't create a criminal record visible on the standard DBS checks. However, repeat offenses or larger quantities can lead to fines, cautions, or prosecution. Enforcement can vary by police force and location. Okay. So it's still very much illegal.
While there are frustrating aspects to being a member of Parliament, long nights and long campaigning for a legislative cause were just two that were mentioned, MPs get a great deal of satisfaction from their job, sometimes getting, as Jackie Late tells us, that nice warm glow that comes from helping somebody. So, not only do MPs get to play a part in making the British Parliament work, they also get to make a difference.
In opposition, doing our best to defeat the government, which is quite difficult when there's a majority of 200 against you, or to change their iniquitous legislation.
That's the most satisfying.
If we succeed, that's the most satisfying.
And is the most frustrating dealing with this social work aspect, or is there other frustrating?
No, it's not frustrating.
Oh.
It's actually very interesting, and hopefully when you can sort out a constituent's problems, then you feel a nice warm glow.
I mean, there are two sides to that. One at the personal level, the most satisfying thing is when you can resolve a problem for a constituent. So when somebody's actually been to see you and
Liberal Democratic Party. How do I see my old chats on this one? I probably lost it. But that was the 5th ranked party, right?
at a personal level, this is tremendously satisfying.
Interesting. There's a majority of
They
200.
have Labor, Conservative. There's the Reform, which is more right. Green, which is more left. The Liberal.
I mean, there are two sides to that. One
Liberal
at the
Democrat is their center.
personal level, the most satisfying thing is when you can resolve a problem for a constituent. So when somebody's actually been to see you, and at a personal level, this is tremendously satisfying. They've been to see you, they've got a problem, you've sorted it out, and you know that individual, you have a relationship with them, and that personal side of the political system, I think, is very important. That's what keeps you going. The fact that Mrs. Smith now has got the welfare check that she needs, you know, which they wouldn't have had without you. And then at the kind of more the professional side of the work, or the intellectual side of the work, it's being able to satisfy your curiosity. If you have a question about how something works, as an MP you can go and find out. So if you want to know, I've always wanted to know, how do the courts work? You know, the criminal courts, what happens there? I can ring up and...
Well, I mean, in today's world, I can literally just go ask AI. That'll give me a pretty good explanation of how the courts
get an invitation by the judge to come down to the courts and get taken through exactly what happens. I want to know how the hospital works. The surgeon at the hospital will be, you know, more than willing to have me down there and tell me how the hospital emergency system works. So it's that ability to sort of find out about things and satisfy your curiosity that it's a brilliant job for. It opens all these doors so you can go and learn about stuff.
Yeah, I try and get out about quite a lot.
For an handbag.
Oh, right.
I don't know.
Where was that then?
Right down there.
Oh, right.
I don't know.
Well, we'll just keep an eye on it. Thanks.
Not a problem, is there?
No, it's a loaf of bread.
So you don't find it too jarring to go from the House of Commons to picking up handbags in the Netto?
It's all part of the job. And I tell you, that's the beauty of being an MP.
I mean, that looks like a man who likes his job.
We've tried to give you some insight into the basic functionings of the British political system, with the added benefit of hearing from members of Parliament themselves about what MPs do and how Parliament works. I hope that this approach not only helps you understand democracy in the United Kingdom, but also parliamentary systems in general, as they make up the majority of democratic systems in the world.
I wanted to link videos to chat. Oh, I did it for all three. Beautiful. Anyway, so it sounds like, well, this is the system essentially that Canada was built off of. Modeled our parliamentary system after the UK. So there's a lot of similarities. It sounds like they half reformed the House of Lords and then got stuck. And they still appear to be stuck today. And it does sound like the current system of politics is being mixed up significantly by a couple new parties. I wonder if we're going to see something like that in Canada, because we're seeing this in a lot of different places. We might see a situation like within the US with both parties just going more extreme to capture that voter base, or we could see whole new parties pop up. The NDP sound like they're going the Green Party path in the UK. Got nothing else on the conservative side, so I guess we'll have to see. Well, that's going to conclude my look at the British system.